So, at this time in our program, I'm extremely pleased to introduce past president of the Rotary Club of London and past Rotary International Director, John Eberhard, who will make a very special presentation. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Diane. As our Rotarians know, Paul Harris met with four men in the evening of February 23rd, 1905 to form Rotary. Little could he have conceived the spectacular growth and enormous force for good that it has become. The Rotary Foundation was formed years later by his friend Arch Klump. Recognition is given to those who contribute financially to our foundation. It is rightly called the Paul Harris Fellowship. Rotarians have funded and supported the programs of their foundation for decades. Foundation programs give us opportunities to make a difference in the areas where the need is greatest: youth, education, healthcare, vocational excellence, environmental concerns, international peace, and humanitarian aid. Today, Glen and Jane, would you believe, is the birthday of Paul Harris. A little trivia, he would have been 153 years of age today. Well, fellow Rotarians, today we celebrate this remarkable man by recognizing two remarkable people who epitomize our motto, service above self. Glen Pearson and Jane Roy. Our club is delighted to honor you with the club's highest form of recognition, a Paul Harris Fellowship. A Paul Harris Fellowship represents an enormously powerful program that funds humanitarian programs in over 190 countries around the world. The official recognition program has 26,000 contributing Rotarians in 145 countries. And very occasionally, a Rotary Club can honor non-Rotarians who have made significant contributions to the betterment of their community, and this is one of those times. Rotary's mission is to do good in the world. The London Food Bank is providing food security for over 35 years and doing good in our community. Members of the Rotary Club of London are delighted to congratulate you and to honor you, its founders, with the traditional recognition of the thanks and in the name of our founder. Not only do you put service above self, you provide our members with that same opportunity. Members from our club regularly volunteer at the food bank to participate in your mission to help a generous community share its food resources. We've seen firsthand that you act as a frontline agency assisting those struggling to make ends meet, and acting as a food warehouse and work with other agencies that assist people in need. Glen, you've been fighting fires all your life. As a former member of Parliament, you've seen governance at the highest levels, and this has served you well as the London Food Bank's executive director since 1987. Both you and Jane have served as chairpersons for the Ontario Association of Food Banks. You lead the food bank as husband and wife team now. Jane, as co-executive director since 1988, you've been remarkably successful at developing the organization's profile in the community. You've been a key member of the Mayor's Anti-Poverty Task Force. We are so pleased that the Mayor, a Rotarian himself, is here today to share in this presentation. The London Food Bank is an important part of this generous city. You help more than 25 other groups and agencies. You initiated the school breakfast program. You've developed the community resource centers, and you are a regional hub distributing corporate donations to food banks to smaller communities in Perth and Middlesex and Elgin counties. In addition to traditional donations of food, you've also led the bank with a virtual online financial contributions format with which to buy food. You adopted a neighborhood food delivery model in the early days of the pandemic. By this innovative virtual collection model embraced by the donors, you have electronically strengthened the capacity to help the poor and the marginalized. Rotary's theme this year, Glen and Jane, is Rotary Opens Opportunities. You were inspired to do just that years ago with your tenacity that proved to be worthy of Paul Harris Fellow recognition. You not only care for the community, but for each other. Your adoptive family represents all that is good and noble and generous. You take care of the community and each other. You are no strangers to Rotary. Some years ago, you received a similar community award from Rotary, and now you will become what we call multiple Paul Harris Fellows. The members of the Rotary Club of London want to thank you on your benevolent and altruistic community efforts. Regardless, while we can't be here together, our past president, Jan Delaney, has already delivered to you the pins which we hope you will wear with justifiable pride. Normally, our president, Diane Proust-Twinstra, would be pinning you. In respect of the COVID-19 restrictions, we'll ask that you perform one additional community service, and that is to pin each other. Jane and Glen, the foundation is our vehicle to carry the daily acts of service performed in 37,000 Rotary clubs around the world to the needs of people around the world. A pin or a brooch is the everyday reminder that a person has joined the ranks of the Paul Harris Fellow. Rotary friends, please welcome Glen and Jane as Rotary Club multiple Paul Harris Fellows. Congratulations, Glen. Congratulations, Jane.
Congratulations on that very, very well-deserved award. I don't know if you would like to have the floor for a minute or two, just to say a couple words.
Well, can I pin Jane? That would be the biggest honor of all.
That would be wonderful.
Or do I do that later?
You can do it right now.
No,
That'd be great.
I want to do it as soon as I can. So.
Yeah, fantastic.
You're the best.
Wonderful. That is great. Well, from all of us here today, on behalf of the Rotary Club of London, we congratulate you on this well-deserved award, and just thank you so much for giving us your time today to be with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's quite honored. Now I need to pin Glen.
Oh, of course. Yes, please do. Oh, I am now at this time, I would like to call upon Bob Early, who will formally introduce our guest speakers today, Glen and Jane. Bob?
Thank you, President Diane. As usual, when John Eberhard speaks, he leaves you a little to talk about, but he's dealt with the 35 years of the London Food Bank, so I've decided I'm going to tell the rest of the story. And now for some personal information. Jane Roy is from London, attended Sir Frederick Banting Secondary School and is a 1987 graduate of University of Western Ontario. In 1982, she was a Rotary Exchange student sponsored by the London North Club and traveled to South Africa when apartheid was still in effect. Her volunteer activism has taken her to Rwanda, Somalia, Guatemala, Iraq during the Gulf War, and Sudan, and has led her to write many newspaper articles to promote awareness of both the opportunities and responsibilities facing Canadians. She is an avid painter, and at least one of her exhibitions at Westland Gallery resulted in all the proceeds sent to the effort in Sudan. She's been a key member of the Mayor's Anti-Poverty Task Force, as John mentioned, and in 2017, the Governor General of Canada awarded her the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers. Glen Pearson hails from Calgary, was a local London firefighter, retiring as a captain after 29 years. At an early age, he was doing aid work in Bangladesh, contracted malaria, and was still affected 3 or 4 times each year. From 2006 to 2011, Glen served as a member of Parliament from London North Centre Right. His campaign emphasized environmental, health care, and accountability issues. In Ottawa, Glen served as assistant critic of environment and then critic of foreign affairs and international trade, and was a member of standing committees on the status of women, access to information, privacy, and ethics, the foreign affairs and international trade, and also Parliament, Library of Parliament. During the House of Commons debate on human trafficking and slavery, Glen gave a very impassioned maiden speech, including his personal experiences and insights, and implored the members of Parliament to take what we are saying in this House tonight and actually put it into deeds, into justice, and into funding to stop these things. Glen is a prolific author of books, touching on topics from foreign aid to citizenship and liberalism to children's adventures. By my count, at least 27 books. He's also received an honorary diploma from Fanshawe College and an honorary doctorate from Western University. Together, Glen and Jane have often consulted with provincial and federal governments regarding poverty issues, and since 1998, they've worked tirelessly on human rights and development projects in Sudan. They co-founded CAS, an acronym for the Canadian Aid for Southern Sudan, which is a Canadian charity located in Wortley Village, with a purpose to build schools, rehabilitate former child soldiers, train future leaders, assist abolishing slavery, develop the local economy, and promote full gender equality and human rights. Glen and Jane have been married over 20 years and are parents to 7 children. Yes, 7 children. They've got an entire baseball team on their own. One of these children is a Sudanese child named Abouk, who they adopted in 2003 after a year-long quest to find this tiny girl, always arriving in villages just after she'd left, with caregivers who were constantly on the move, fleeing the violence. Finally, they found her, but she was 15 months old, weighed only 12 pounds, and few gave her a chance of survival. The girl responded to care in a Nairobi hospital, and soon Jane and Glen were able to take her home. When she was 4, they decided she should see her homeland. And when they were visiting a Catholic mission, they were all greeted by a young girl identical to Abouk and by another brother. Needless to say, these 2 siblings soon joined the Pearson Roy family in Canada. Rotarians and guests, without further ado, I would like to introduce Glen Pearson and Jane Roy.
Thank you. That, sometimes when you hear those things in context and the whole life story, it's been a real privilege to do as many things as we have. I think it's important for you folks to understand the importance of Rotary and the importance that it placed on the journey that I went through when I was young. 16 years old, applied to be a Rotary Exchange student, where you go away and you live away from home for a year. And I actually applied to go to Australia. I wanted to learn how to surf and I wanted to visit the Great Barrier Reef. And in their wisdom, they decided to send me to South Africa, for which I'm eternally grateful. And if you can imagine being a 17-year-old kid in South Africa at a time of apartheid, where there's white-only toilets, there's colored toilets, there's black toilets, the whole segregation, and seeing that with your own eyes it was huge with regards to understanding the privilege that we as Canadians have, but also realizing our life is meant to be bigger than ourselves. And so that whole experience and that whole Rotary experience was fundamental to the journey that I came on when I came back. Went to university. Obviously, I was actually wanted to be either an architect or a physician or something. And I lived with a family of physicians and also started to understand that there was lots of different ways that I could help. So in the end, ended up at the food bank while I was still at university and still at school. And fondly enough, I still Zoom call, I still FaceTime my South African parents to this day. They're in their 90s and I'm still connecting with them, which has been kind of an amazing connection as well. And so, so from that, obviously we've got involved in a thing like a food bank, and we want to talk to you a little bit more obviously about the journey of the food bank and what's been going on, particularly during the pandemic. The pandemic hit us over a year ago and things fundamentally changed at the food bank, like a lot of different other agencies. The board and we made the decision right at the very beginning that we weren't going to close, that we were going to do everything within our power to stay open. Other food banks across the country faced a fair bit of crisis, and we apologize. There goes Abouk behind. The face crisis, most food banks work with volunteers. And of course, when the pandemic hit, a fair number of them lost all of their volunteers. The food coming in dried up in the context of people weren't making donations. But what ended up happening was the London public and different levels of government as well just started to give virtually and were just incredible in their generosity. We stayed open. We took a lot of those steps in terms of, serving people anybody could come to the food bank for help, but we would serve them outside. So they would come in one at a time. We would talk with them, and then they would go back outside, and volunteers would take out the hampers to them. And what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic was that the numbers spiked up with regards to the numbers of people that we were helping. But then over the summertime, as most of the level of governments, most of the relief programs kicked in, our numbers went down. But also a lot of the agencies that we were serving, some had closed, but a fair number of agencies out in the outlying areas, their numbers were starting to increase. And we realized we actually needed to look at a different way of doing things. So we unofficially work with about 5 or 6 different agencies to get packages delivered to folks who can't make it out. And of course, you've just heard about the neighborhood resources and the Ys in particular, but we're working to make sure that we can get food out to the neighborhoods and get food closer to the people. And we've talked about this for years and years, and it's been very, very difficult in many ways to establish due to resources and due to other things. But the public has been so generous that we've actually able to get that going, and we've been really pleased about that in the context. The pandemic has, in many ways, is a lot like doing relief overseas, and it was an emergency. And with whether it was Ed Mayor Holder starting a number of different roundtables, which assisted as well, bringing folks together. Most of the social agencies went through major crisis in the context of they didn't know how to handle it. So it became, for so many of us, a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week kind of job for so long. The ability to talk to other, and that's what happens overseas with a lot of crises and a lot of emergencies. And living through that, you realize it's incredibly stressful, but it's also, this doesn't sound right, but encouraging in the context. You are at the forefront of people's generosity, but you're also at the forefront of doing something and helping. And so as we were all hearing about all these stories about how difficult it was for so many people, we and the board and our staff and lots of volunteers were there assisting. And it was really good to be part of that, and really good to figure out a way to assist. So we've got a much better work-life balance, wouldn't you say, Glen? But it's, and we never thought back then that this would go on for as long as it has. But it looks like it's going to go on even further. But again, the public has been amazing, has been wonderful. We are almost at the food bank close to pre-pandemic levels with regards to the numbers of people we directly help. Before pandemic, we were up at 3,400 families a month. We're now, and this is just at the food bank, we're now over 3,000 families a month that are coming to us for help. And we're bringing on, as we mentioned, resource centers one by one, and bringing on the Ys one by one if they've got the capacity to go as well. And then we continue, part of the Glen will talk about some of the other programs, but we still looked at it as a way to continue to talk about the food system within London and assist. So we, in the midst of the pandemic, greenhouse got going in the midst of a pandemic. People more and more were talking about fresh food, and we were able to actually work on that more and more. So over 50% of the food that we give out at the food bank is fresh. The fact that people give us money allows us to purchase things like milk and eggs and other things as well, fresh produce. But the whole package is not just the typical non-perishable, which is still really important. It's non-perishable, it's frozen meats, it's breads, it's milk, it's eggs, it's fresh produce. It's this larger hamper. And that's all come about because people have been so wonderfully generous. I think, the numbers of agencies we serve has gone down because a lot of those agencies that we served with regards to were doing meals are not necessarily open or haven't been operating. There's no school breakfast program, for instance. happening. But we did more and more get involved with the homeless lunch program and with WISH, which was the group that helped folks. So I'll probably let Glenn speak a little bit more about that because he's been spearheading that. But it's the reach, the London Public's reach through the London Food Bank has been phenomenal. And with it, we still have 6 staff. We still have 100 volunteers. Some of our older folks chose to stay home for obvious and safe and wonderful reasons. But a lot of retired teachers and other folks came out of the woodwork and come in regularly to assist. So we've been incredibly thankful. And Glenn, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Thanks for hearing us out, everybody. When the pandemic first hit, we'd never been through one before. Neither one of us are that old, but we scrambled like everybody else did. But we had a board meeting and we said, you know, for 35 years, every single time we've gone to the public over something, they've always responded. And we just have to be there for them at this time. It's not them being there for us, which they always have been and always will be. It's that we need to be there for them because they are locked in and they're going to try to find ways to express their compassion and their citizenship in this community. And they did. We started the online, our very first food drive was 2 weeks after COVID started, and we made it virtual, 3 times more than we had gotten the year before. Business Cares had their food drive, and Wayne Dunn, who does that, that's a group of 500 businesses who help us every December. He said, Glenn, we're probably going to get about 40% of that this year because businesses are really struggling. And when it was all over, it was 40% more than they got the year before. This is the kind of community we live in. It's a remarkable testament, and what it needs to be, I think, is just give an advantage, an opportunity to show what it can do. Jane is right, we took on the homeless lunch program, but that's because groups like Cargill and Mercedes-Benz gave money towards that. Vito Frigia and Southside Construction Group gave $100,000 to it. But it was also just citizens getting on the website and saying, we want to pay $5 for a lunch. We had 2 kids come here one day who gave us their allowance, $5 lunches. Like, you cannot be negative in times like that. This is your community mobilizing. And that's what happened. And I've taken to calling it the COVID advantage. Because of what the public did during COVID, we are now doing things we've never been able to do before because we never had the resources. Everybody was always depending on us, and therefore we had to get things out there. But the changes we wanted to make, we couldn't. But we got a greenhouse going in that time, in the pandemic. And we did the homeless lunch program, reaching out to all of these different areas and helping all these different agencies, right? It's been remarkable. We've never had a year like it in 35 years, nothing even close to it. And the whole reason why that is true is because of the public and the business community, the government support, agency support, including Rotary. I mean, we have never had a year like it, and all of a sudden change is possible. We're not having to, we never did anyway, but we're not having to apply for funding or anything else. The generosity of London meant that they'd already donated, and we can make those changes that we needed to make. And that's what we did. It is the COVID advantage. In my own life, personally, in Bangladesh and in Ireland and in Sudan, and I know in Jane's as well, we had never confronted this. It was always about a lack of resources, and that's why we were there. Suddenly in COVID, London responded in ways nobody saw coming or even imagined. And we had organized ourselves to be ready for that. And they came through just as we thought. It's been a remarkable time. And I turned 70, by the way, in this COVID year, just at Christmas time, and I have never felt younger. I have never felt more enthusiastic about this city. I know we're up against the wall. I know we're on the mat. I know it's not easy, but if you could just see all of these liberals and conservatives and NDPs and Greens and libertarians all down at the food bank making up hampers, you'd say, my God, I wish Parliament could be like this, right? And then if you could see anti-vaxxers along with people who are really trying to get their vaccines still down at the Parliament at the food bank and working together, you realize that the community still needs this opportunity to express and to show its belief in itself and its corporate being. And that's what we have. So I have been lucky. I have been in this year, I have experienced something I never thought possible. That happened to me before, by the way, when I became a politician. And when I became a politician, I didn't like it. And many of you know that. It just didn't suit me. And I struggled for 5 years in there. And what I didn't like about it was that it was like this all the time. People were just always fighting and always had these different positions. And then all of a sudden in 2008, London West elected Ed Holder. And Ed Holder came along, and then all of a sudden, Ed and I began to cooperate together because we were friends, because he'd helped the food bank in the past, but because we realized that our community was worth it. And Ed and I just decided we were going to do that regardless of what our party said. I think Ed struggled with that much more than I did because I was an inconsequential member of parliament. He was in cabinet. That's important. But the point was, Ed did it. He did it, and he paid that price. And that's one of the bright spots of Parliament that I'll always remember. In that really difficult time for me, when people came together and decided they were going to transcend for the sake of their community, that's what they did. And I've always loved Ed for that. I loved him before. I love him now. I always will. But that wasn't an easy thing for him to do. But he did it. And that's what we're all capable of doing. And Rotary, we have done this forever. I mean, ever since we first got started as a food bank, Rotary was there and helped us. I think Rotary's done so many fantastic things, but there's one thing that it did that exceeds everything else. And I've got it right here with me, and I wanted to show it to you.
Oh my goodness.
That's Jane Roy, way back when she was 17 years old as a Rotary kid. And she went to South Africa, she's told you, and she came back and nothing was ever the same for her or for us. You know, we started the food bank then, but the food bank success is dedicated and very much driven by Jane's commitment to humanity. And she would be the first to tell you that she always had that, but it was never focused. It was South Africa that did that for her, and it was Rotary that sent her there. So you're the gift that keeps on giving. You are. You made this community so rich. You give it one of its best assets, and you've helped the food bank along. But I know you've helped us in the past too. But we all have to keep believing. All of us who believe in this community will keep showing up. We'll keep doing it. And when others are pulling away or fighting over things or whatever, we understand that. But we're not going to do that. We're going to come together and help this community survive and thrive. So thank you for this. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you again for giving me Jane. That was such a wonderful thing. And thank you above all for the example you set for this community. You could have shut down like many did. You didn't. You keep meeting, even if it's virtual. You keep giving. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. At this time, I just wanted to acknowledge our Mayor Holder. On behalf of the Rotary Club of London, I'd like to thank you for all of your efforts over the last year. We know you face many, many challenges every day. And just so you know how much we appreciate everything you do for us and our city, we will get through this pandemic together. But thank you for everything you do for us. I'm now pleased to ask you if you would please thank Jane and Glen for speaking to us today. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Diane. Fellow Rotarians, let me start by saying this afternoon I have the distinct privilege to say thank you to two very dear friends. I've known them almost as long as I've lived in London. We've worked together through the Business Cares Food Drive for so many years, and the great honor I had to serve with Glen in Parliament. And I share that with you because we had the rare and unusual challenge, but possibility of working together from different sides of the house. But it was always for a greater good. And I won't ever forget that. I've never known two people who so embody caring and community commitment. From freeing slaves in southern Sudan to giving the less fortunate a hands up. Glen and Jane, you symbolize the best of London. From building schools and shelters in third world countries. What you do is you symbolize hope. Together, you've been co-directors of the food bank for, I think, now some 25 years.
35, Ed. 35.
35. Well,
We're getting older.
Well, it's not obvious since Jane apparently was a Rotary student at 10 years old. So that's what I'm thinking on that. But, you know, Rotary has bestowed the Paul Harris recognition on you. And yet, as I've heard your comments, here's what I heard from you, and that you're throwing down the gauntlet for the rest of us to pick up the torch and to care and to do more. What I know is this, that there is no greater gift than the gift of helping those in the spirit of humanity who are less able to care for themselves. And you're the greatest examples I know of humanity. You're people of faith. You represent hope. You offer love and compassion for those in need. So if we're all a bit more like Glen and Jane, fellow Rotarians, just imagine the possibilities. You know, my Cape Breton mother would say, there are two kinds of people in the world, givers and takers. Well, here we are today surrounded by the two greatest examples of givers ever. Now, Glen and Jane would be the last to accept this honor for themselves, but they would take it as an example to others, to lead by example if we just give back. So whether it's food sustainability or mental health issues or addictions or homelessness, today we recognize two people who have chosen in this community to make a difference. So let me congratulate you as well, Glen and Jane. I want to thank you for your unparalleled generosity of spirit. And I think that's very evident by your comments today. And I hope today represents a moment where all of us on this call and beyond can truly make a difference. I'm so proud to call you friends, and on behalf of Rotary, I thank you for your presentation, and thanks for leading us all. Thank you, Madam President.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. It was lovely. And thank you all for being with us today. Just such a special meeting. In close, I would like to thank Jan Delaney and her entire Paul Harris Task Force team for their great efforts in putting this very special meeting together for us today. The pandemic definitely added to the challenges of coordinating the event. And on behalf of the Rotary Club of London, all the members, Jan and your team, you did a wonderful job. Please introduce your team.
Yes. Bob Early, Bud Laughlin, Elizabeth Harris, and Kirk Patterson.
Thank you all for such a wonderful job, and just a wonderful meeting. And our community needs us more than ever. So I hope you all leave today and have a wonderful week. Thanks for everything you do for Rotary.